I struggled like 10 minutes to come up with some kind of bass line that I actually liked. I wasn't really feeling inspired by it. I ended up stopping right before I improvised this chord progression. If it wasn't for that chord progression, this track would have been abandoned long ago. So we're starting from scratch, all 16 tracks blank. I'm dedicating the first 4 and 9 through 12 as drums, and 5 through 8 and 13 through 16 for melodic content. This kind of keeps everything in its own little block instead of being spread out horizontally. Here, I turned down the C operator. Now I'm copying the preset for all 8 tracks. And once I settle in onto some usable drum sounds, I'm gonna go ahead, extend all the patterns to 128. Get the tap tempo going. Turn on the metronome. And just kind of start feeling the groove. It's not gonna be perfect. This is my second attempt at a bass drum and snare pattern. After adjusting it a bit, fixing all the mistakes, here I'm fine-tuning all the sounds. That way they all sit in the mix properly. Here I'm using the high pass to get rid of all the lows and accentuate the bass frequency. You can do the same for the snare drum. Here I'm introducing some noise to kind of give it a little bit more of a pop. Here I'm turning off the ADSR and just putting AHD. Here I'm adjusting the sweep depth, the tune, kind of experimenting with the wavefolds, see what kind of artifacts that introduces. Here's a nifty trick I learned from a bunch of YouTubers, mainly like Ivar, Tridi, and Cenk. Use the bit reduction and an LFO to kind of accentuate that pop at the beginning. And I did that as well for the snare drum, just for that initial transient. Alright, moving on to the track 5, we're making a bass synth using the wavetone. After I settle onto something I like, I turn on the keyboard setup and using the scale, Phrygian scale. It's not in this clip, but I struggled like 10 minutes to come up with some kind of bass line that I actually liked. And you know, that happens sometimes. You get in a rut and you start overthinking it too much. You can't get anything out. Or maybe you're on a crunch for time, like I am these days, watching my kid. Sometimes you only get an hour of like nap time. That's all you get for your time to create. So maybe you're a little bit pressed for time, maybe you're in a rut, but sometimes just banging it out helps speed things up a little bit. And honestly, I was pretty surprised with this bass sequence. So I started adjusting the release time, shortening the release time. That way you get more of a staccato kind of a bass rhythm instead of just like a long run-on sentence. Next, we're moving on to track 6. And here I'm just trying to find some kind of melody, or some kind of pattern, or what kind of notes I'm gonna hit. Now I'm experimenting with the comb plus filter to kind of get that kind of brassy string-like sound. Mix that up with the sine. When underneath it, kind of get that nice soft texture. And kind of turn down the body just to kind of get more of a clarity of what this brassy sound is making. Now I'm gonna adjust the C operator and tune it more to like a saw. That kind of cuts through the mix a little bit. Experimenting with the wavefold, see what kind of artifacts that introduces. The AB wave. And at the end I settled on 2 octaves up. That way it kind of sits over the mix. Now I'm gonna go to track 14, and I just copied over the same sequence from track 6 to track 14, just to kind of experiment with layering another pad underneath it. This way you kind of fill out the mids. You got the lead, track 6 sitting up here, you got track 14 here, you got the bass here, and then the drums sitting underneath it. Here I'm experimenting with one of my favorite go-tos is putting the ratio all on an LFO and set it to random and like just a slight depth. That gives like enough movement where it's doing its own thing and you don't, you're not really stuck with a static sound anymore. This is one of my patches, called it Hazed, just because it's so flowy and kind of feels like you're in a foggy haze. And here I experimented with the scale, put a bass octave down, 1-3-5 shape, and I really like this chord progression. Honestly, this is what saved this track. The other stuff was kind of okay, but I wasn't really feeling inspired by it. But I ended up stopping right before I improvised this chord progression. I took a 30-minute break in between taking care of my kid, and then I found time to come back, listen to it with fresh perspective, fresh ears. And I ended up loading that patch you just saw, the Hazed pad. And then I started messing around with the chord mode, and that simple chord progression really changed things up. If it wasn't for that chord progression, this track would have been abandoned long ago. So that really made a difference. Here on the bass synth, I'm experimenting with the probability rate. I put it at 75% just so that it's not constantly playing every single note. And I set the retrigs to a quarter length and a rate at 1/8. That way it kind of fills the gaps a bit. And by this time, I didn't record this on camera, but I copied the track 5 track sequence and sound into track 7, and I just kind of hired in an octave, and I started experimenting with the same probabilities and mess around with the LFO, set some panning. That way it's moving around in the stereo field and not just stagnant. And here I'm adjusting the frequency range and kind of getting into acid territory here. I'm just kind of listening to it, see how everything's sitting in the mix. Messing around with another favorite, the sample rate reduction. I set it to post filter, and you really start getting some vowel movement. This is what I'm doing right here. I'm kind of finding this sweet spot, and now I'm gonna automate it with an LFO. That way it's animating on its own, it's kind of alive, and I'm not having to tweak it a whole lot. I honestly use LFO random way too much. Kind of lean on that hard, but it really comes in handy. Like, it makes everything just feel more alive, and you know, you can press play on something and listen to it forever and it'll never be the same. Which, you know, it could be bad, but at the same time, if you're not really trying to release your tracks and get them widespread, and you really just have an hour or 10 minutes even just to like play around with your synths and listen for a little bit, it can be like therapy. It's honestly very soothing and kind of relieve all that pressure of like trying to get things done all the time. Even though it is nice to get things done and release them and, you know, share with everybody, it's kind of nice to have things for yourself sometimes. Here I'm finally gonna turn on the compressor. You can believe it or not, there wasn't a compressor on all this time. That's the beauty of like mixing things properly before you get to the compressor. Here I'm experimenting with a new feature that they implemented in the last update with OS 1.1, was that you can hold a trig and page and affect all the parameters or all the tuning in that specific page. And now I got a variation for that ending, so you build some tension up a little bit. Now this is a few days later. I came back to it and I improvised another B section to it. There's honestly a lot more things going on in this ending section that I didn't cover in the first part of the video. But if you like this sort of stuff, I'm gonna be posting more longer and uncut videos explaining my processes on Patreon, as well as project files for these sounds, for these tracks. So if you want to get on that, the links will be in the description. I appreciate you sticking around for this. Even though it's a little bit more faster paced, I hope you got something out of it. But I appreciate you guys hanging out. Remember, keep chasing those happy accidents, one pattern at a time. Later, guys.